You don't remember entering the restroom. One moment, you're walking down a dim hallway, your footsteps echoing just a little too loudly against the tile. And the next, you're standing inside a narrow stall, the door already locked behind you. The air feels wrong. Not cold, not hot, just heavy, like it's pressing against your skin, crawling into your lungs with every breath you take. There's a faint chemical smell, cleaning solution mixed with something older, damp, almost metallic. You wrinkle your nose, but it doesn't help. The scent sticks. You glance down. No toilet paper, of course. You let out a quiet sigh, the kind people make when life hands them a minor inconvenience. Nothing serious. Just annoying. You reach toward the holder again, just to be sure. Empty. That's when you notice it. The silence. No footsteps outside. No doors opening. No distant chatter. Not even the hum of the fluorescent lights above you. It's like the entire building decided to stop existing the moment you stepped in here. You hold your breath, and the longer you listen, the louder your heartbeat becomes. Thump, thump, thump. Then, a sound. Not from outside, not from above, from right behind the door. A presence you can't see, but you can feel. Close enough that if the door wasn't there, it would be standing directly behind you, watching. The air shifts slightly, brushing against the back of your neck like a breath that doesn't belong to you. And then you hear it. A voice. Soft, calm, almost polite. Too polite. Do you want red paper or blue paper? Your throat tightens. You don't remember anyone walking in. You don't remember hearing the door open. You don't even know where the voice is coming from. But you know, without a single doubt, it's talking to you. You open your mouth. Just a simple answer, right? Red or blue. That's it. You've made harder decisions today. Coffee or tea, left or right, stay or leave. So why does this feel different? Why does it feel like the moment you say anything, something irreversible will happen? Your fingers twitch, your mind races, and just as the word begins to form on your lips, that wasn't your imagination. That is how Aka Manto chooses his victims, the scenario you just experienced. That's considered a mild encounter, a warm-up, a courtesy introduction before things get significantly worse. Welcome. You've just stepped into one of the most persistent urban legends in Japan. One that doesn't chase you, doesn't scream at you, and doesn't need to break down doors, because it doesn't have to. AKA Manto waits. Always in places like this, isolated, enclosed, where your guard is down and your options are limited. School restrooms, public stalls, anywhere you think you have a moment of privacy. A dangerous assumption. Because privacy, in this case, just means no one will hear you hesitate or answer. I am the archivist. And today, we're not just telling a story. We're dissecting a system, a pattern of behavior that has remained disturbingly consistent across decades. A question designed not to test your preference, but to exploit your instinct to respond. So, before we go any further, lower the lights, put your headphones on, and think carefully. Because by the end of this, you won't just understand Aka Manto. You'll be wondering what you'd say if you ever hear that question again. You have to understand something about school legends. They don't begin with ancient scrolls, cursed temples, or dramatic thunder cracking over a haunted mountain. No, that would be too generous, too cinematic, too easy to avoid. They begin in places you're forced to use. A hallway after class, a stairwell with bad lighting, a restroom at the end of the corridor where the tiles always feel damp, even when they're dry. Places built for routine, not terror, which is exactly why they work. AKA Manto belongs to that category of fear. the kind that hides inside ordinary architecture. His legend is most commonly tied to Japanese schools, especially the kind of restroom where the last stall feels just a little farther away than it should. Students whisper about him between classes, passing the story from one nervous mouth to another. Over time, the details change. The location shifts. The voice gets softer. The rules become sharper. But the structure stays the same. You are alone. You need paper. A voice offers you a choice. That's it. No grand entrance, no tragic monologue, no helpful warning label from the supernatural department, because apparently budget cuts hit the afterlife too. Some versions describe Aka Manto as the spirit of a man in a red cloak. Others suggest he was once a beautiful figure, admired or envied, who became something cruel after death. In a few tellings, he wears a mask, hiding a face so unsettling that seeing it becomes its own punishment. But the exact origin matters less than the pattern he leaves behind. He is not a wanderer. He is a station, a fixed point of dread inside a private space. That is what makes him different from so many other urban legends. He doesn't need the dark forest. He doesn't need an abandoned house. He waits in the one room where you are least prepared to run, least prepared to explain yourself, and definitely least prepared to negotiate with the polite supernatural creep offering office supplies. And here's the part that makes the legend survive. Aka Manto weaponizes embarrassment. Think about it. Most people don't scream for help in a restroom unless something has already gone catastrophically wrong. You hesitate. You rationalize. You assume you misheard. You don't want to look ridiculous. That hesitation is where he lives. The legend may have grown through schoolyard rumors, but its roots dig into something older. The fear of being trapped while vulnerable. The fear that privacy is not protection. The fear that the door you lock to keep the world out may have locked you in with something else. And once you understand that, the question stops sounding silly. Red paper or blue paper? It becomes less like a choice and more like a ritual beginning. Because Aka Manto's origin isn't really about where he came from, it's about why he keeps coming back. And unfortunately for you, the answer may be simple. Because people keep answering. You keep expecting something dramatic. A shadow stretching across the floor. A hand reaching under the stall. Something obvious. That's your first mistake. Aka Manto doesn't announce himself like a horror movie cliche. He doesn't need to. By the time you realize he's there, your body has already noticed long before your mind catches up. It starts small. The air changes. Not colder. No, that would be too easy to explain. It becomes denser, heavier, like every breath has to push through something invisible before it reaches your lungs. You shift slightly, uncomfortable, but you tell yourself it's nothing. Bad ventilation, old building, skill issue, right? Then your skin reacts, a faint prickling along the back of your neck. Not quite a touch, not quite static. Just enough to make you pause, your fingers hovering midair as your brain quietly runs a background check on your surroundings. Something is off. You don't see him. That's the second mistake, expecting visual confirmation. Because Aka Manto doesn't rely on sight. He relies on presence. You feel him before you ever see anything. A pressure behind you, a certainty that if you turned around, if you somehow managed to open that stall door, you wouldn't be alone anymore. And the worst part, the more you try to ignore it, the more defined it becomes. Your ears start to pick up details that weren't there before. A faint shift. Fabric moving? Maybe? Or something brushing lightly against the door from the other side. No footsteps. No breathing. Just subtle movement. Controlled. Intentional. And then there's the voice. It doesn't echo. It doesn't distort. It doesn't sound ghostly in the way your brain expects horror to sound. It's calm, clear, positioned just close enough that you instinctively lower your own voice in response. Because that's what humans do. We match tone. We respond. Red paper or blue paper? Now here's where things get worse. Some accounts describe seeing him. Not clearly, never clearly, just fragments. A glimpse through the gap beneath the stall door. Not feet, not shoes, just darkness, shaped incorrectly. A reflection in the metal latch. A smear of red where there shouldn't be anything at all. And in the rare cases where someone claims they saw him directly, they always mention the same thing. Height. Too tall for the space, too still for something alive, too composed for something that shouldn't exist. A figure wrapped in red. Face obscured, either by a mask or by something your brain refuses to process fully. Because sometimes, not understanding is a form of self-defense. And then there's the detail most people overlook. He doesn't reach for you. He doesn't break in. He doesn't force anything. He waits. Perfect posture. Perfect patience. Like a customer service representative from a nightmare dimension, holding a script and waiting for you to pick an option. Because physically, Aka Manto is almost irrelevant. His real form is the situation itself. The closed stall, the missing paper, the question you feel compelled to answer. That's his anatomy. Not flesh, not bone, but a perfectly constructed moment where your instincts betray you. And once you understand that, you realize something unsettling. Even if you never see him, you will always know exactly where he's standing, right behind the door, waiting. You think this is a question. That's the problem. It's not. It's a trigger. AKA Manto doesn't hunt you the way predators are supposed to. No chasing, no lunging, no dramatic escalation. There's no final boss phase where things get louder, faster, more desperate. Everything important happens in one quiet moment. The question, red paper or blue paper? And right there, right in that exact second, your brain does something incredibly human. It tries to solve it. You start analyzing. Red, blue. What do those mean? Is one safer? Is this a trick? Should you pick something else? Should you stall? Should you joke? That impulse to respond? That's the trap snapping shut. Because Aka Manto operates on a system that looks like a choice, but behaves like a contract. Two options, both invalid, both binding. If you say red, the outcome aligns with the idea of red. Not literally, not graphically, but symbolically. Fast, final. Over before your brain fully processes what just happened. Heat, pressure, a sudden absence where you used to be. If you say blue, the system shifts. Slower, colder. Your body reacts differently. Breathing becomes the problem. The space feels tighter. The air feels thinner. You don't disappear instantly. You experience it. Every second stretching just long enough for regret to settle in. Different routes, same destination. And if you think you're clever, if you try to outplay the system, yellow paper, no paper, leave me alone. That's when the rules stop pretending to be fair. Because now you're no longer a participant. You're an error. And systems don't like errors. Some accounts suggest the response becomes unpredictable. Not random, no, that would imply chaos. This is still controlled. Still deliberate, just no longer constrained by the illusion of options. You tried to break the script, so the script breaks you. But here's the part that matters. The most dangerous moment isn't when you answer, it's the silence before you do. That gap, that hesitation, because Aka Manto doesn't rush you. He lets your mind fill the space. Lets your thoughts spiral, overlap, contradict each other. The more you think, the more pressure builds. The more pressure builds, the more you feel like you have to respond. Humans hate unresolved prompts. We complete sentences. We answer questions. We close loops. Aka Manto exploits that instinct perfectly. He doesn't need to force anything. He just asks and waits. And eventually, you answer yourself into a corner. Now compare that to something like SCP-173. That thing gives you a clear rule. Don't blink. Simple, brutal, physical, or SCP-096. Don't look at its face. One mistake, and it's already on its way. Those are systems you can understand. AKA Manto? He gives you a rule disguised as freedom. A choice that isn't a choice. And the worst part? You already know the correct move. Don't answer. Don't engage. Don't play. But knowing something and doing it under pressure are two very different things. Because when you're alone, in a locked stall, with something standing inches away from you, silence stops feeling like control. It starts feeling like a risk. And that's usually when people make their first and last mistake. You'd like to think Aka Manto is outdated. An old story. A school rumor. Something that belongs to dusty hallways and flickering fluorescent lights from decades ago. The kind of thing that should have been left behind, along with rotary phones and chalkboards. That assumption? That's your fourth mistake. Because Aka Manto didn't disappear. It adapted. Look at the structure again. A confined space. A moment of vulnerability. A simple prompt with limited options. Now tell me that doesn't sound familiar. You're on your phone, late at night. The room is quiet, lights dimmed. Because apparently, humans enjoy setting the perfect mood for bad decisions. A notification appears. Accept or decline. You don't read the details. You don't question the source. You just feel that small, irrational pressure to respond, to clear it, to resolve it. Because unanswered prompts itch. They sit there, waiting, demanding closure. Sound familiar? AKA Manto is that exact mechanism, just stripped of the screen and placed directly into your physical space. No interface, no escape button, no remind me later, just you. And the question. Modern horror likes to pretend it's evolved. Analog horror, digital hauntings, cursed files, creepy-ass ARGs that live rent-free in your head for weeks. But strip away the aesthetic and most of them run on the same underlying system. Input to response to consequence. AKA Manto was doing that long before it was cool. You are the input. Your answer is the trigger. The outcome? Predetermined. That's not folklore, that's programming. Think about terms and conditions. Nobody reads them. You scroll, you click agree, and move on with your life. You trust the system because it looks official, structured, harmless. Now imagine if one of those agreements actually mattered. Not legally, existentially. Red or blue? It's the same design philosophy. A limited interface that pressures you into making a decision quickly before you fully process the consequences. And once you commit, there's no undo, no customer support, no appeal. Good luck with that. Here's the kicker. AKA Manto doesn't need to exist physically to function. All it needs is a confined environment, a vulnerable subject, a forced decision. That's it. Which means the legend isn't just tied to a restroom anymore. It's tied to behavior, the instinct to answer, the discomfort of silence, the need to resolve uncertainty. As long as those exist, so does he, and that raises a slightly uncomfortable question. What happens if you hear the voice somewhere else? Not in a stall, not behind a door, but in a moment where you're alone, distracted, and just uncertain enough to hesitate. Would you still recognize it? Or would you treat it like every other prompt in your life? Something to clear as quickly as possible? Because at the end of the day, Aka Manto isn't just a story about a man in a red cloak. He's a system. And systems don't die. They update. You already know what you're supposed to do. That's the frustrating part. Every version of the story, every whispered warning, every so-called survival guide repeats the same advice like it's some kind of cheat code. Don't answer. Don't engage. Leave. Simple. Clean. Almost insulting in how easy it sounds. Now, put yourself back in that stall. The air is thick. Your breathing feels louder than it should. There's something standing right outside the door, close enough that you can feel its presence pressing against the thin barrier between you. And then the voice comes again. Calm. Patient. Red or blue? Silence stretches. 1 second. 2. 3. Your mind starts to panic, not loudly, not dramatically, but in that tight, controlled way where thoughts begin stacking on top of each other too quickly to process. What if ignoring it makes it worse? What if it's waiting for an answer? What if silence is the wrong choice? That's the real trap. Not the options. The doubt. In theory, the correct action is to refuse the system entirely. No input, no response. Break the loop before it closes. In reality, humans are terrible at that. We are wired to respond, to acknowledge, to resolve. Silence feels unnatural, like leaving a sentence unfinished or a door half closed. It creates tension, and your brain will do almost anything to relieve that tension, even if the relief lasts less than a second. Let's say you manage it. Let's say you stay quiet. You unlock the stall, push the door open, and walk out without looking back. No sudden movements, no clever remarks, no last-second glance over your shoulder like you're in a horror trailer. You leave. Just like that. Congratulations. You've technically won, but here's the part nobody likes to include. You didn't beat Aka Manto. You exited the interaction. That's it. Because the system didn't fail. It didn't break. It simply didn't receive input. And systems like that, they remain active, waiting for the next user. Which brings us to the number you actually care about. Survival chance, 12%. Not because escape is impossible, but because under pressure, real pressure, not hypothetical, you are overwhelmingly likely to respond. To say something, anything, even a whisper, even a single word. And that's all it takes. So here's your final takeaway. If you ever find yourself alone, in a place that feels just a little too quiet, if the air starts to press in, just slightly, if a voice, calm and polite, asks you a question that sounds almost harmless, you already know the answer. Or rather, you know the importance of having none. Stay silent. Walk away. And maybe, just maybe, you'll remain something Aka Manto never gets to process. An unanswered prompt. Sweet dreams, if you can.